Welcome back. All right, so lots of games most of the day on Saturday, and I'm debating about something. So we've got 12 games tomorrow. Three of them are early. I think I should do a review of the three matinee games. Get those done, and then I have 9 games for the rest of the night, and then I could do a review for that. So yeah, it lasted a week, but anyways, so and really it is more of a trying to, I mean, a 12 game review can end up being really long. Of course, the power rankings end up being around half an hour, and it can just make for a really long Saturday night. So if I review these 3 games by themselves, makes my Saturday night a little bit easier. So, but in general, I'm gonna stay away from just doing one game review at a time. So I'm gonna review all 3 of these together. Whereas before I would have reviewed these 2 and then would have reviewed this one by itself. Not tomorrow. So 12:30 Eastern, 12:30 p.m., which is 9:30 a.m. Pacific. So 2 of them starting at that time. So the 11 a.m. starts I was a fan of gone. The New York Islanders are in Boston. The Islanders won both games. Those were both in New York. They won 3-1 on December 16th, and they won 4-1 on February 17th. So Boston trying to avoid the sweep. The Islanders, who have been playing for really nothing for a long time, but you know what? They're showing that pride counts. 28, 25, and 9 is their overall record. Their last 10 games, they're 7-2-1. They've won 2 in a row. Away from home, they're 11, 13, and 5. They're 3 points behind Columbus. They're 6 points ahead of Detroit. On the Boston side, they're 40, 19, and 5. They've quietly had a very good year. Last 10 games, they're 8-1-1. They've won 3 in a row. I've watched as they just keep climbing the power rankings this week. At home, they're 19, 10, and 2. They're 7 points back of Florida. They're tied with Toronto now, and they're 1 point ahead of Tampa. So things are getting interesting in the East. Also at 12:30 p.m. Eastern, 9:30 a.m. Pacific, the Tampa Bay Lightning in against the Detroit Red Wings. So Detroit's trying to avoid a 3 game sweep against Tampa, although the games have been quite different. October 14th, a very hotly contested game. 7-6 overtime win for Tampa. March 4th, a much quieter 3-1 win for Tampa. Actually, this is the third of 4 meetings. They meet again on April 19th. So still avoiding the sweep if they win tomorrow, because then Tampa can't win all 4. But for Tampa, they're 39, 18, and 6. They've got to get it together. They're 4-6 in their last 10. They've lost 3 in a row in regulation. Away from home, they're 20, 12, and 2. They're now 1 point behind Toronto and Boston. They're 2 points ahead of Washington. So we might get Florida and Tampa anyways in the first round. And I think we'd be quite happy about that if that did happen. On the Detroit side, they're 26, 31, and 7 over their last 10 games. They're 2-7-1. They lost their last game in regulation. At home, they're 17, 12, and 4. They're 6 points back of the New York Islanders. They're 4 points ahead of the Buffalo Sabres. So Detroit pretty entrenched in that spot, although Buffalo's getting better. Then at 3 o'clock Eastern, noon Pacific, the Chicago Blackhawks and the Vegas Golden Knights renew their rivalry of sorts. January 8th, 2-1 win for Chicago. And I mean rivalry of sorts because they never met in the playoffs or anything. And so Chicago won the first meeting. Vegas will be trying to even things up. These teams meet again on April 27th. So Chicago can play spoiler. They're 24, 32, and 9 over their last 10. They're 4, 5, and 1. They won their last game against the Kings. Away from home, they're 13, 16, and 4. They're 7 points back of San Jose. They're 11 points ahead of Seattle. So again, trying to play the spoiler role. On the Vegas side of things, they're 35, 28, and 4. Last 10 games, they are 3 and 7, but they won their last game over Nashville, and they needed that. And it feels like that was a big win. So we'll see against Chicago whether or not it was. At home, they're 19, 13, and 3. They are 1 point back of Dallas, who have games in hand on Vegas. So Vegas needs to win these games to put the pressure on the Dallas Stars. And they're 3 points behind Edmonton, who also have games in hand on Vegas. So for Vegas, they need to get it in gear, or else they will miss the playoffs. Then we fast forward 4 hours to 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific. The Toronto Maple Leafs in against Montreal Canadiens. This has been a split so far this year. October 13th, Toronto wins 2-1. February 21st, Montreal wins 5-2. There will be another meeting between these teams. They meet the 4th time on April 9th. So for the Toronto Maple Leafs, they're 40, 18, and 5. Over their last 10, they're 5, 4, and 1. They did win their last game. 17, 11, and 3 away from home. They're 7 behind Florida. They're tied with Boston, and they're 1 point ahead of Tampa. So For the Toronto Maple Leafs, they are looking to maintain their spot. They're going to be keeping an eye on Boston in the morning, of course, and then they'll know what they have to do against Montreal. For Montreal, they're 17-37-10. The last 10 games, they're 4-3-3. They lost their last game. As I've been saying, that bump you get from a new coach, that seems to be done for Montreal. But it's Toronto. So Montreal, I think, will have zero problem getting up for this game. At home, they're 9-19-4. They're 7 points back of both Ottawa and New Jersey. So the odds of them stepping out of last spot in the East, pretty slim right now. Also, 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific. The Florida Panthers in against Ottawa. December 14th, Ottawa wins 8-2. And yes, that was during the COVID issue that Florida had, but still, it's Ottawa. And then Florida got their revenge March 3rd with a 3-0 victory, which seemed a lot more lopsided than the score would tell you. The fourth meeting between these teams will be April 28th. For Florida, they're 43-14-5. Last 10 games, they're 8-1-1. They've won 2 in a row. Away from home, they're 17-8-6. They're 7 points ahead of both Toronto and Boston. On the Ottawa side, they're 23-36-5. Last 10 games, they're 4-6. They're coming off of a win against Winnipeg. At home, they're 12-19-2. They're 2 points back of Philly, and they're tied with New Jersey. And so this should be a fun one. Florida, honestly, should win this. But Ottawa, they can surprise you. Also at 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific, the final meeting between the New Jersey Devils and the Washington Capitals. October 21st, Washington wins 4-1. On January 2nd, New Jersey won 4-3 in overtime. For the Devils, they're 23-36-5. Last 10 games, they're 4-6. They did lose their last game. Away from home, they're 8-22-2. They're 2 points behind Philly. They are tied with Ottawa. On the Washington side, they're 36-20-10. Last 10 games, they're 7-2-1. They did win their last game. At home, they're 15-13-5. They're 5 points behind the Rangers. They are 2 points behind the Tampa Bay Lightning for that number 1 wildcard spot. So again, they're playing well. Tampa has not been playing well lately. It is possible Washington passes Tampa, and we could then be looking at a potential Florida-Tampa Bay first-round matchup, which I will vote in favor of. That would be awesome. Also, 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific. People might be surprised I'm not wearing Dallas or Vancouver because they're against each other. November 7th, Vancouver wins 6-3. The next meeting will be April 18th. I will be at that game. We're going to that game that night. For Vancouver, they're 31-26-9 overall. Last 10 games, they're 4-3-3. They lost their last game in extra time against Minnesota. But I think they were happy with 3 points out of a possible 4 out of those games against Colorado and Minnesota. Now they got Dallas. Away from home, they're 17-13-4. They're 4 points behind Dallas, so this is key for them. They lose this game, they're 5 or 6 behind Dallas, depending on whether it's in extra time or it's in regulation. And then, yeah, you can basically pack it up because Dallas has games in hand on Vancouver as well. They're 3 points behind Vegas, and they're 1 point behind Winnipeg. So there's work to be done by Vancouver. There are 3 teams for them to jump past if they want to get into the playoffs. Again, the odds are against them, but at least they're in the hunt, which at the time Travis Green was fired, if I had told Canuck fans they were going to be in the hunt for the playoffs, they might have thought I needed my head read. Dallas is 36-24-3. Their last 10 games, they're 6-4, but they've won 3 in a row. At home, they're 21-8-1. They're 4 points behind St. Louis, 1 point behind Nashville, and 1 point ahead of Vegas. So every game is a key game. Of course, the last game they stole against Carolina thanks to the amazing goaltending from Scott Wedgwood. So we'll see if Ottinger can get into a battle with Wedgwood. Maybe they try to one-up each other, and it's a fantastic tandem from here. Then we fast forward an hour to 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific. The St. Louis Blues and the Carolina Hurricanes. November 13th, Carolina wins 3-2. St. Louis now is going to try to even up the series. Carolina's 42-15-7. They're 5-3-2 in their last 10. They lost their last game in extra time. But really, no. For me, Carolina losing that last game, you have to kind of put an asterisk there. It was stolen by Wedgwood. Away from home, they're 18-10-3. They're 3 points ahead of Pittsburgh. They're 4 points ahead of the Rangers. St. Louis is 35-19-9 overall. Last 10 games, they're 3-4-3. They lost their last game. At home, they're 28-4. They're 1 point behind Minnesota. They're 1 point ahead of Nashville. Things are getting interesting, aren't they? And, of course, they're 4 points ahead of Dallas. So the Central Division is going to be very interesting to watch down the stretch. as is the Pacific, although it looks like we're going to get 5 Central teams and 3 Pacific teams. That's highly likely. Although, again, Vegas is not that far out, just the 1 point. Also at 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific, the Minnesota Wild at home against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Columbus coming off of an overtime loss against Winnipeg tonight. March 11th, a 3-2 win in a shootout for Columbus. Minnesota will be trying to even up the season series tomorrow night. The Columbus Blue Jackets 32-29-4 with that overtime loss. They're 4-4-2 in that overtime loss, of course, their most recent game. Out of those 10, away from home, they're now 14-16-1. So that's the first blemish in extra time for them on the road against Winnipeg. We'll see what happens against Minnesota. They're 3 points ahead of the Islanders. They're 9 points ahead of the Detroit Red Wings. They're not making the playoffs. On the Minnesota side, they're 6-3-1 in their last 10. They've won 4 in a row. So they've gotten hot while other teams in their division have not been. At home, they're 21-7-1. They're 1 point ahead of St. Louis. They're 2 points ahead of Nashville. So Minnesota's in a pretty good spot. If they could host, if they can end up finishing second, I like their chances of at least coming out of the first round, which would be a benefit, I think, for Kaprizov, for the Minnesota Wild, and for their fans. 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. So 2 hours between the start time of this game and this game. So it's not that busy of a night tomorrow, really. You have the 4 games at 4 o'clock, 2 an hour later, and then the late games come in. So I won't have a problem keeping up with things. I say that now, and then something crazy happens in a game, and I got to focus on that. Anyway, the Battle of Alberta starts at 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern. So Edmonton and Calgary, due to Hockey Night in Canada, they end up having to wait an hour later than normal to get things started. This is the 4th and final meeting. Edmonton's won 2 out of 3. Edmonton wins October 16th, 5-2. They win January 22nd, 5-3. And then Calgary won the most recent meeting March 7th, 3-1. For Edmonton, they're 36-24-5. Last 10 games, they are 6-3-1. They did win their last game. Away from home, they're 16-12-5. They're 2 points behind LA. They are 3 points ahead of Vegas. So Edmonton's cheering for Chicago tomorrow. And if they get that win, they can get themselves 5 points ahead of Vegas and maybe pull themselves in line with LA. So you're also cheering for Seattle if you're an Oilers fan tomorrow. Calgary, on the other hand, they just want to make sure that that doesn't matter. They want to knock Edmonton down a notch. They're 6-3-1 in their last 10 to get to their 39-17-8 record. They did win their game tonight against Arizona. At home, they're 26-6 with that win over Arizona. 7 points ahead of LA and 9 points ahead of Edmonton, which means they're 12 points ahead of Vegas. So Vegas is not going to win the division. I'll go out on a limb and say that. And for Calgary, they should. This should be their division, and then it's a matter of how do things turn out in the playoffs. I mean, right now they would play against Nashville, right? So that's a tough series. If they get Nashville in the first round, people keep pointing out like, oh, well, the teams in the East have more points. Nah, it's going to be a dogfight. I don't think there's going to be an easy series in the West either. The one it reminds me of back in the late 80s, mid 80s too, the Norris division. You didn't have the best teams in the Norris division. Chicago wouldn't be very good. St. Louis, Toronto, Detroit. But then in the playoffs, it was vicious and brutal, and there was so many hits and fights, and it was some of the most exciting playoff hockey. I think the West has the capability of doing that as well. So if you get Calgary and Nashville, you're going to have some heavy hockey. You're going to probably have some fights, and it could get rough, I would say, first period of game 1. So we'll see how things turn out. 10:30 Eastern, 7:30 Pacific, the Seattle Kraken in against the LA Kings. January 15th, LA wins 3-1 in this matchup. They have 2 more meetings. So if you're a Kings fan, good news. You got 3 more games against Seattle tomorrow, and then on March 28th, so just a couple of days later, as well as April 27th. So if they can run the table against Seattle, really helps their chances of ending up finishing potentially second in the division. For Seattle, they're 20-38-6 over their last 10. They're 4-5-1. They have won 2 in a row. But for Seattle, they're just so far behind everybody. They are 9-20-3 overall. They're 2 points ahead of the Arizona Coyotes. On the LA side of things, they're 35-22-9. Their last 10, they're 5-3-2. They had an extra time setback against Chicago in their most recent game. At home, they're 17-13-4. They're 7 points behind Calgary and 2 points ahead of the Edmonton Oilers. So, yeah, the Kings want to stay in that spot and maybe get a little closer to Calgary. I don't know who you're cheering for if you're LA. Do you want to see Calgary lose so you can get within 5, or do you want to see Edmonton lose so you can get 4 points clear of Edmonton? All right, we'll see what happens with that one. Also at 10:30 Eastern, 7:30 Pacific. So we have, 10 hours between the start time of that one and the start time of this one. So when I say I'm watching hockey all day, it's not hyperbole. It's all day tomorrow. So Anaheim's won both meetings with San Jose so far this year. They'll try to keep that going. February 22nd, they win in a shootout 4-3, and March 6th, they win in overtime 3-2. Now I'm wearing Sharks because I don't think the Sharks sold off as much at the deadline as Anaheim did, and I think Anaheim is not going to say they're intentionally tanking, but I don't think they mind if they get a better draft position. That's a way to look at it. The fourth meeting between these teams will be April 26th. So for Anaheim, they're 27, 28, and 11. Last 10 games, they're 1-7-2. They've lost 3 in a row in regulation. Away from home, they're 11, 14, and 7. They're 10 points behind Dallas for that last playoff spot. They're not getting there. They're 1 point ahead of San Jose. So this is where things get interesting because San Jose would jump past them, and again, draft lottery odds get better for the Ducks. For San Jose, 28, 28, and 8 is the record. Nice, tidy record with that. At last 10 games, they're 4, 4, and 2. They lost their last game in regulation. At home, they're 15, 14, and 4. 1 point behind Anaheim, as I said, and 7 points clear of the Chicago Blackhawks. So we'll see how things go. We'll see if Anaheim ends up catching Chicago, who are currently 8 points behind them. I'm going to say no, but you just never know. There are teams that have a decent record, and then all of a sudden after the deadline, it just falls apart. And we'll see if that's what's going to happen with Anaheim this year. I do think better days are ahead for the Ducks. Let me know your thoughts, including your picks, in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.